Hello, y'all, and welcome back. So, we're looking at virtue ethics, the idea that to understand right and wrong, you go to a person, the best person you know, and this is going to be somebody who possesses the virtues. We looked in the last video at some strengths of virtue ethics. It has this organic, natural feel to it, and it seems to capture really well the idea that we understand human moral character and how good people would act in a certain situation better in a more intuitive way, perhaps in a more natural and even more morally accurate way than we understand lists of rules or calculations of benefit. This seems to have a lot of plausibility, this virtue ethics idea. But of course, virtue ethics is not without its flaws. And the chief one seems to be this. If I go to a virtue ethicist, I'm in a tough moral spot, I say, what do? They say, look, don't panic, go to the best person you know. Now, if I say, well, I'm not sure I know who that is, they say, it's okay, find someone with the virtues, and that will be the person you should consult. And the natural question here then is, of course, what are the virtues? What character traits are the virtues? Because there are many character traits, hundreds, I should think, of character traits. And some are clearly and unambiguously good, but there's a fair amount of fuzziness. Again, the best possible example of this, and I know this is a controversial example, but just too good not to use, is Donald Trump. This is a person, arguably the most famous American, certainly the most controversial American, but distinguished by the way that he polarizes the American community. So half the country, roughly, seems to think he's kind of the Antichrist. I know personally people who think this, right? That he's the worst thing to happen to American politics or public life or whatever, that he's a criminal and a scumbag. And the other half seems to think that he is not only a good person, a good leader, but a sort of a savior figure, really the only person standing between us and complete destruction at the hands of certain other forces that would do us in. So this sharp divide on this person's moral character. But the truly crazy thing about this, and I think I even mentioned this in another video, is that there is largely substantial agreement on which character traits he possesses. Do you see? He's bold, he's brassy, he's aggressive, he never apologizes, he never backs down. Right? He's in your face, he offends people. And some people think that's a terrible way for a person to be. You shouldn't be like that. And others clearly think that's a good way for a person to be, or for a man to be, or for a leader to be. And when I see this sharp division in the American public on this person, to me it raises a concern about virtue ethics. And the concern is this. Again, virtue ethicist says if you're in doubt morally, you go to a good person, the best person you know. That person is the person who possesses the virtues. I say, great. Which character traits are the virtues? Here there should be clarity. There should be objectivity. An ethical theory should give you clear guidance. Maybe not utilitarianism's crisp decision procedure, but objective guidance nonetheless. And what you find is that you don't quite have that when it comes to the virtues. Which character traits are the virtues? Are the character traits that I just described Donald Trump as having, are those virtues? Are those good? Should I try to cultivate those in my own life? Or should I not? Are they in fact vices? Should I try to avoid them? There needs to be a little more clarity and objectivity on this question than there in fact is if virtue ethics is going to succeed as a theory. Now, supposing you say, all right, don't panic. Let's just make a comprehensive list of the virtues, put our heads together and do this. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do this. So I started to do it. I started to write down a list of the virtues, and I thought, this is hard. This is kind of boring. I'm going to research this. Now, I'm a highly trained researcher. So I didn't just Google list of virtues and take the first thing that came up. I Googled list of virtues and I took the second thing that came up. And it was this list that I'm going to show you right now from thevirtuesproject.org, a fine website. So for instance, we see on this list the virtue of humility. We see the virtue of service. Now, Aristotle, whom we've looked at in an earlier module, would be aghast at this. Aristotle would say humility, choosing to make yourself low. Service, choosing to serve other people. Aristotle says, look, the people who serve us, our slaves, do so because they're worse human beings. If you're better than other people, you either know it or you don't. If you don't know it, you're dumb, in which case you're not actually better. If you do know it, though, you will act like it. Aristotle says that a truly virtuous person possesses necessarily a virtue which he calls greatness of soul, in Greek, megalopsychia. This virtue where you walk amongst your fellow man knowing that you are better. And you're not condescending to them, you're not unkind or mean, but you just know that you're superior. Bless you, my child. Bless you, my child. You carry yourself with this bearing. You do not ever voluntarily make yourself servile, make yourself humble, lower yourself. That is, says Aristotle, not only not a virtue, it is actually a vice. It shouldn't be on the list. Now, no less an ethical thinker than Jesus completely disagrees. Jesus says not only is humility, service, the second most important virtue after love, I suppose, but unless you possess this, unless your life is characterized by this, you will never have the only thing worth having in human life, which is entrance into the kingdom of heaven. He says this in so many words. So these two major heavy hitter ethical thinkers, right, easily top five, Aristotle and Jesus, completely disagree on this virtue. Even from a more contemporary perspective, when I look at this list, when people are asked what traits are they looking for in a potential partner, we're not great when it comes to listing traits that we ourselves want to possess. We become better when listing traits we want a potential life partner to possess. So the number one trait people say is kindness, which makes sense. You don't want to be with a meanie. But how about the second trait, number two thing that people say they're looking for? It's not on the list. It is, as you may have guessed, sense of humor. Humor. Nowhere on this list of virtues. And it seems to be a character trait. I think we all would regard humor or wit as a character trait, and yet it's not on here. Is it desirable? Well, it clearly seems to be. Now, at this point, if I was the author of the virtuesproject.org, I'd say, all right, Herrick, God, nobody asked you to pull up this list at 11:30 at night and start taking shots at it. If you're so smart, make your own list, right? And they would have a point. If I am so well possessed of this list of virtues that I can critique any list of virtues I see on ancient or modern grounds, what am I doing Googling list of virtues at 11:30 at night and taking the second thing that comes up? Why don't I make my own list? But again, this is a concern for virtue ethics. In principle, virtue ethics as a theory would present a list of virtues that is so objective that it could make you change your mind. So you would look at this list of virtues, you would say, I understand now. These are the virtues. And in light of that, you could, in principle, if the theory I think is functioning with sufficient objectivity, change your mind about Donald Trump. Perhaps you like him and you look at the list of virtues and you say, oh, well, he doesn't possess these virtues. He's not a good guy. Or conversely, you don't like him and you say, well, look, he's got these virtues. I guess I need to bite the bullet and accept that he's a good guy. But nobody, in looking at a list of virtues, would change their mind or has ever changed their mind about Donald Trump or anyone else. And this is a concern for the theory because an ethical theory should ideally inform our moral intuition. It should shape our moral intuition. And virtue ethics, and this is not just a concern I'm raising, but other people, including Hursthouse, raise this concern, seems to risk re-expressing our moral intuitions. It seems to be, not to be too crude and quick and dirty about it, but a little too subjective. I'm not saying this is a defeater for virtue ethics, it's just a concern. A working virtue ethicist needs, and all virtue ethicists I know do in fact do this, needs to address this as a concern. In the next video, we're going to look at another twist in thinking about virtue. So join me for the unity of the virtues. Thanks.